Hello, sexy people. Welcome back to Get to the Plot Film Club, the official podcast. It is a new day. It's a new film. Very excited to talk about things. First of all, how are you all doing? I hope we're all doing very well. I'm currently filming this quite late in the evening, actually, because I've just had a really busy week of everything happening this week. And I filmed the Odyssey episode with Nat today as well, so that went really well. Really excited for you guys to listen to that, because honestly we had so much to talk about. It's almost a 50-minute episode, but I think it should be out the same day that this one comes out, so make sure you listen to it. And if you are listening to this first, then I hope you enjoy this one and then get straight onto that one. But yeah, it's gonna be really exciting. I just wanted to do like a little spiel really quick though, just to say thank you, really. The podcast kind of, to me, was just kind of a thought that I had on the side when I started up the film club, of like, it would be nice obviously to be able to kind of round up everyone's reviews and talk about things, but I wasn't too sure how to do it, and I thought, oh, maybe I do a podcast. But then sometimes when you're like, oh, doing a podcast, it feels really pretentious. And also for me anyway, I don't, like, some of you guys might be able to relate to this, but it's just sometimes when I have thoughts and I want to express them, my brain is already thinking about the third thought I have in my brain, and while I'm talking about the first one, if you can already see, I'm kind of glitching out, because sometimes I would just want to get my words out, but then I'm already thinking so far ahead that they don't always come out very cohesively. However, I think since doing this podcast, it has really helped me with that, which has been really nice. But I think it's definitely been one of my biggest fears, starting up a podcast, because you want to be engaging, you want to make sure everything that you're saying is important and there's a point to it. And don't get me wrong, I'm very good at waffling about anything, but I don't always then say anything of value in those points. So I really appreciate everyone that's listened and done reviews for the podcast and things like that, because it's actually been quite difficult for me to feel confident about what I'm producing. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you very much, and I do appreciate all the support, because it has really given me the confidence to keep up with this. And for me, I just knew, as long as, if there's one person that waits every Saturday for a podcast episode, I will do it for that one person gladly, because if that means someone's enjoying it, then I'm more than happy to give you a little bit of that in your life. But thank you. I just thought I'd do a quick little thing at the beginning there. But we're talking about Insomnia in this episode. This film, I don't know. I don't really have a lot of bad things to say about it, but I don't feel like I have a lot of good things to say either, because I just feel like it was a very middle of the road movie. I think also because I'd seen the Odyssey first, I had a lot higher hopes for this movie, but it felt just incredibly generic, and also a bit more of kind of what I assume Christopher Nolan to be like on the everyday, if that makes sense. Because of the films that I'd witnessed, I talk about this in the Odyssey episode, about how I'd seen Tenet and started trying to watch Inception, didn't like that. I walked out, I think, 40 minutes into Oppenheimer, but to be fair, I did kind of have a little bit of food poisoning on that day, so you kind of have to understand that. But I also then got very overwhelmed by the movie and not being able to understand it, because it felt like it wasn't for me. And I think with this movie, again, it just didn't feel like it was for me, which is okay. That's completely fine. Films are targeted at very different audiences, and everyone has different favourites, things they don't like. And I think it's just what Christopher Nolan's into producing and directing don't always float my boat. But the Odyssey, however, have very different thoughts about that, so make sure you check that episode out. In regards to researching this movie, however, there wasn't really a lot to find out, or at least anything that like majorly surprised me, to be honest. I'm not selling this episode at all, but it was just that when I was looking into these things, it was like stupid facts that no one cares about, or at least it's not really a fact that you can kind of bring to a dinner party. For example, one of the facts was, oh yeah, Christopher Nolan and Hilary Swank have the same birthday. They're 4 years apart and they're both left-handed. Like, why do I care? You know what I mean? No one cares on it. Like, I mean, maybe all my lefties out there are like, no way, Christopher Nolan's a left-handed man, which I'm not surprised about. He seems like the kind of person that would be left-handed, and I can say this because my sister's left-handed, so they just give off the same vibe. But it just felt really, like, unimportant. But I also think then it's kind of like, if you haven't really got a lot to say about the making of this movie, then I think it kind of speaks for itself. But I'll tell you a few facts that I found out. So this movie is actually a remake of a 1997 Norwegian thriller movie by the same name. And I'm pretty sure I saw in an interview that the director of the original Norwegian thriller was really happy with the outcome of the movie, really happy that Christopher Nolan was directing it. So big ticks from that, which I think is reassuring. And it's also, I think this movie, I can't remember when this movie came out. I don't think it was that far off 1997. I mean, Christopher Nolan did Memento in 2000, and that was the film that kind of got him this directing gig. It was Steven Soderbergh, I think that's how you say his name. He's the producer of this movie, and after watching Memento, he just thought, I need Christopher Nolan to direct this movie, because I think it is very much his vibe. And this is the only film that Christopher Nolan has directed and not had an official writing credit for, even though he contributed to the final draft of the screenplay himself. He wrote the final draft, which is really weird. I never really understand. And if anyone knows more about this in the comments, please let me know, because when they say, oh, this person's not been credited for their acting or credited for the writing, why? I don't understand why you wouldn't be credited. There we go. It's late. I'm tired. But I don't really understand why that happens. Maybe I'll do some more research and I can give you an answer in the next episode. But if anyone knows, please let me know, because it just seems odd, especially when like certain actors aren't credited. Oh my god. When certain actors aren't put in the credits, then it does kind of confuse me. But it's an interesting question to ask yourself. So, Christopher Nolan said in a Time magazine interview that he was dealing with two leading actors with very different approaches to their acting. Al Pacino very much insisted on meticulous preparation. However, Robin Williams was more kind of no rehearsal, go with the flow, see what happens in the moment, very much more preferring to do many takes. It's difficult. I prefer, I think, as an actor myself, I haven't been anything yet, but it will happen. I think as an actor, I think very like sort of general rehearsal I think is important, obviously, for like hitting your mark and knowing where the camera's going to be at certain points. However, I think I'd much rather just do it in the moment, or do one run through of it. Oh mate, it's difficult because actually you'd hate to waste a good performance and then think, oh crap, like no one was recording that, so now I have to do it all over again. That's definitely happened to me before. I've cried in rehearsals, it like for a character, and then you kind of think, oh no, like that could have been perfect if it was on camera. But I think I'm definitely probably more on Robin Williams' side of things when it comes to that kind of approach, especially if you're doing like a scene where it's very, close and personal with another character. Or, for example, the ferry scene where Dorma and Finch meet for the first time, that was all done without rehearsal, because Christopher Nolan wanted them, because they're meeting for the first time, they wanted their unfamiliarity of each other to shine through their performances, which I do think really did work. So I'm glad that they did that. But they very much had different approaches, and Hilary Swank as well was very much, I just want to do a few takes, because she wanted to make sure she was completely focused throughout all of them. But I don't think Al Pacino and Robin Williams ever really got annoyed at each other on set about their acting approaches, which is good. Just shows that they're both professional and proves that they can adapt for each other, which I think is also really important. When you hear actors arguing with each other, it's like, dude, get a room, but also you should be able to adapt. People have methods, but you can learn to change them or adapt yourself for the environment. And I think that separates the regular actors from the impeccable ones. Fun little fact, actually, Harrison Ford was considered to play Will Dormer, but obviously got given to Al Pacino. I do think Al Pacino does a really good job in this movie, actually. He's very much known for his sort of intense fiery characters. So I think the fact that he did decide to play this down a lot more, I think that made the character a lot more believable. If he'd gone in all guns blazing, I just don't think it would have worked. I mean, obviously he had moments where he had his little crash outs, which again worked, but I think the subtlety of it, although there were points where I was like, excuse me, can you speak up a little bit, please? Because I can't hear you. Because you're going, oh, I don't know, I just can't sleep. Yeah, like, what? Yeah, I think it was all very cliche when it comes to the fact the film's called Insomnia and you keep being like, I just want to sleep. I can't, I've not been sleeping. You know, and it's, oh, has he got insomnia by any chance? But the fun little fact about sleeping, if you're interested, is that the average person can stay awake for 6 hours straight. No, 6 hours? 6 days straight. But the record holder actually stands at 11 days straight, under close supervision, I must add. But Dormer in the movie is awake for 6 days and eventually sleeps, quotation marks, on the 7th. And I don't know about anyone else, but please agree with me about the fact that I saw him saying, let me sleep, like before the film even started. I knew for a fact he was going to say it. That was the way the movie was going to end, is that dude was going to die and go, just let me sleep. Well, actually, in one of the original script, he was meant to live and that Ellie was meant to help him get back to the police station, but I much prefer him dying. No offense. I think also because it's one of those things where when characters have to live with guilt, you wonder what's going to happen, and he would have been one of those people. And the thing is, it happens in the Odyssey. Am I allowed to say this? Because I'm scared that people will be like, I haven't seen the Odyssey, but I've seen this. It doesn't matter. It's an old story, and it's not really a spoiler. I think when characters have to deal with suffering, you might as well just kill them off. But that's not in relation to the Odyssey. That's different. So don't panic. And hopefully, I just wouldn't listen to this episode again, because then maybe I have spoiled it. I actually can't remember. On the DVD commentary, Christopher Nolan says that the scene where Dormer watches Rachel sleeping in the bed, apparently all the audiences, when it came to testing the movie and screenings, thought that it was suggesting that they'd slept together. That is not the case. He wanted it to reflect that they'd been talking all night. Did that come across though? That's the question. I felt it was a bit weird because I thought, why are you not at work, babes? Like, you're running this hotel, why are you sleeping in his bed? I thought that was really weird. I don't think she should have been in his bed. I think she should have been on a sofa or just somewhere away from his bed, because that felt weird. I didn't like that scene at all. Looking at it, I was like, this is uncomfy. I didn't think that they'd slept together, but I was a little bit like, why is she in your bed? Why is she asleep? Why does she trust you so much? I think there's so many questions with this movie, but they're questions that I kind of really don't care about enough. You know, there are some endings to a movie that you're like, God, what happens? Oh, I just want to know what happens. God, I'm so desperate. With this, I'm like, she was in your bed. Why is she sleeping in your bed? Oh, the end. Oh, you don't have to give me an answer. I really don't. It doesn't matter to me. Now, obviously, Robin Williams is sadly not with us, which is really sad because I think he had so much more to give us, and yeah, obviously he sadly passed. But I think it said in his biography by Dave Itzkoff that this movie was kind of when he took up drinking again, because they were filming, I think, in Canada, and it was quite an isolating set that they were on. I think they could only really go from either set or hotel, and it said that Robin Williams only really could talk to people when he was at the bars there in Canada, which then obviously he started drinking again. I don't know in relation to kind of when he died how close it was to that, but obviously it's kind of sad to think that actors are kind of pushed into those situations because of the circumstances of filming. But even though the film was obviously a lot more moody and somber, he was always the one to lighten the mood, because he's just a funny guy. This movie had 12 nominations and only one win, and that was for Director of the Year at the London Critics Circle Film Awards for Christopher Nolan. Again, I'm not really that surprised. No one, again, really stands out enough. I think Al Pacino and Robin Williams do a really good job, but because they're both good, no one sticks out more than the other, which is fine, which is still good, though, because then no one's making the other one look worse. I'm glad that they're both doing a really good job, but I feel like it's one of those films you watch and then you kind of instantly go, I can't really remember anything that stuck out to me. So yeah, but I'm going to hear what you guys have to say now. Got some reviews, some lovely reviews from you guys. I honestly love this bit so much. I love reading everyone's thoughts and stuff. So Kat gives it 3 stars and says, the premise was really cool and the acting was great, but I found myself getting a little bored and my brain switched off at some points. It didn't feel like a Nolan movie to me. Of all of the Nolan movies I've seen, I normally give them 4 stars or more, but this just didn't have the same feeling for me. The ending was quite interesting though. Yeah, I think I was getting a little bit bored at points, and there were actually I was I was writing the notes for the Odyssey episode while I was watching this movie, and I remember there was a point I kind of missed, and I was a bit like, oh, I should probably go back and just quickly watch that just to make sure I didn't miss anything, and I didn't miss anything. So I actually did that like a couple times. I felt really bad, and the thing is, like, I've just been busy anyway, like trying to just coordinate everything, but nothing was doing enough for me to be like engaged, apart from, I'd say, some of the editing, the sort of moments where Al Pacino was kind of losing the plot a little bit. I loved those, and that was definitely something that kept drawing me in, because I was like, oh, I feel like we haven't had much of this yet, and then it got repetitive, and I was like, okay, I can't see where this is going now. But I do agree with you, and I think also, yeah, like I said before, seeing the standard of the Odyssey and then straight to this, I was a bit like, okay. It's just not, so I feel like it didn't feel like Christopher Nolan's heart was really in this movie, but it still is a good movie. But yeah, Ella gives it 3 stars and says, the premise of the town where the sun never sets is such an interesting concept, and it really creates an unsettling atmosphere throughout. I also loved the contrast between the constant brightness of the town and the moral ambiguity of the characters. It was a subtle but effective way of reflecting the guilt, isolation, and inner conflict that runs through the story. Yeah, like, I really like this bit that you put in your review, Ella, because I think it's something that is really clever when you think about it, but I think it doesn't stand out enough to then make you value it. But it's one of the more sort of like basic parts of the movie, if that makes sense. Like, for example, when we watch Hot Fuzz, there's so many little intricate details about it that then make you go, oh my god, that's crazy. Whereas you read something like this and you're like, oh, that is quite interesting, but then it's like, that was the point, that's just it. Like, there wasn't really anything underlying, that was just, it was in your face, but it isn't something you naturally pick up on, if that makes any sense. Like, it's subtle, but it wasn't like it's not a bonus feature in a sense. It just kind of is what it is. That I couldn't really pick up on anything in particular that made me go, oh, that's a really cool aspect that they've done there, and now that you pointed it out, I love it. But with this, it's like, oh yeah, actually. God, I'm slandering this movie today. But yeah, I liked the contrast. Yeah, the constant brightness. Loved that aspect. The build up of him trying to cover up the windows, and then yeah, I really liked all of that. Actually, I will give flowers where they're due. That was a really great part of it. Magda gives it 3.5 stars and says, in my opinion, it's one of the hardest genres to write well. It takes a certain kind of genius to create a truly compelling mystery. I was expecting a proper investigation, but I felt like there was rarely any investigation at all. The solution came far too easy and didn't require much thinking from either characters or the audience, and that's exactly what I'm looking for in this kind of movie. Again, yeah, I agree. I don't feel like I was thinking. I don't feel like that even they were really thinking. You know, even when Ellie's character came forward and said, I've had a little thought and we should probably talk to the guy that wrote this book. It just... I don't know if that made a sound. I'm sorry, I just hit my head on the mic. Like, it felt really just underwhelming. Of like moments I feel like they should have been like bigged up a bit more, and yet I didn't care about it. I think the only point that I actually felt like there was something really going on, or at least a little bit sort of like, was the bit where Will Dormer goes to the boy's house and is trying to look for the gun, and then the police turn up. That moment, I do like, it stuck with me, that moment, but yeah, everything else just felt like one blur. And I think what doesn't help is the fact that it all looked the same. So, when movies all just look the same, it's hard to visually, anyway, for me, pick out a moment and then come back to it. I think I had such high expectations for this movie, and I think they really did not get up there. So I think that's why I'm very finicky with this one. And lastly, Georgie gives it 2.5 stars and says, great cast, but the plot felt rather repetitive. However, I liked how they left the movie on a cliffhanger, as it had me questioning if she would turn him in. But no moment really had me hooked like the other Nolan movies. Yeah, I think I'm glad I watched this movie because, like you said, it's a Christopher Nolan movie. He does it well, but it just, felt repetitive. There were things that kept me relatively engaged. I think obviously meeting Robin Williams' character for the first time, that was really interesting. Obviously the moment where he shoots his partner, that was interesting, but it just then got to a point where I was a bit like, can we just sum this up now in an email? But yeah, like cliffhanger. But I think also he died, and like I know you said, will she turn him in? Good question. But then it also did feel maybe slightly a little bit like, yeah, she will, because I feel like at the end of the day they're both dead, and that's gossip. Like I'd tell people if they're both dead and it's not going to impact anyone, I'd tell everyone what happened. And I think obviously that's what Dormer wanted. So, I it's just, it's not one that I'm itching for an answer for. I just think it kind of rounded it off for me. Like, he died. The end. Like, he doesn't have to live with the guilt anymore. And I think he's probably happy about that too. But yeah, I'm going to leave the episode there. Actually, before I leave the episode there, I'm going to give it 3 out of 5. I think that's like actually a pretty good review in terms of stars. I personally think when it comes to 3, I think you've executed it fine, but nothing special. So I think when you get into like 2.5 territory, it's like, oh, it's basic, but coherent enough to get away with getting there. But number 3 is like, you've executed a movie, it's pretty alright, but nothing special. And I think that for me is what I'd sum up this movie. So yeah, let me know in the comments your thoughts about my opinions, and we'll compare and see what happens. But yeah, I just think it was just a bit disappointing, but I will definitely say go listen to the Odyssey episode, because we talk so much more about just Christopher Nolan and a lot more about his techniques. There's so much more evident in that movie. Don't get me wrong, they had some moments in this one that I thought, oh yeah, that's very Nolan, but it just felt a bit too basic for him, really, to be honest. I think he's an incredible director, and he just didn't get to explore that enough in this movie. So yeah, but thank you all so much for joining me in this episode, and I will see you all next week for the next movie. I'm going to be picking the next movie, and then the week after is going to be the vote again for the next one. So very excited to see what that turns out to be. But don't worry, the next film is going to be very chill, very just switch your brain off and enjoy yourself, hopefully, because I haven't seen the movie, but well, we shall definitely see. So yeah, have a lovely week, and I'll speak to you all very, very soon. All right,